Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I would say it's a pleasure to be here, but the topic that we are starting this week is certainly not a pleasure. In fact, I have told a number of people I hate speaking about this. It is not a comfortable thing to talk about. We are going to be discussing a number of different things over the next coming lessons. But I think that this particular lesson right here is vitally important because it kind of sets the stage. And it will not be your typical lesson. So I hope that you plan on sticking around through the rest of them, because if this lesson is all you hear this morning, I'm sorry. This lesson is going to be about setting the stage, kind of getting us in the mindset of how it all started for me and my brother. And it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable at all. I am normally a very energetic speaker. But this particular lesson is one that it drains me. So I hope y'all will give me the grace that I need to make it through this. You know, there are a lot of people who suffer. And I am glad that the junior high and high school is in here as well, because for the majority of people, that is about the age that they are going to be introduced to what is going to set them up for the long term. And whether that is drugs or alcohol or even the kind of friends, the type of character that child will develop will carry on throughout the rest of their life. And it is important for us to be able to recognize that as the young people sitting in the audience, but also as the adults who are leading them, as the parents who are guiding them, and showing the importance of what it is to set a firm foundation in truth, a firm foundation in love, and a firm foundation in responsibility. Because ultimately it will come down to those things when that child, or even us, are introduced to something later on in life that could potentially sway us in one direction or another. But I know there are so many, if not in here, but maybe are listening, or people that you know who have dealt with things like addiction. And you know what? We're going to go ahead and just kind of clear this up, because I'll talk a little bit about this later on throughout the seminar. I want for you to know that there is a difference between addiction and habit. But for these particular lessons that we are going to be talking about, we're going to kind of use them interchangeably, those terms. Now, the obvious difference is that habits are normally something that are easy to break, and addiction is something that is more chemically dependent. But I want you to understand that habits are also chemically dependent in some way, shape, or form. And we will get into that lesson we'll get into that information in the next lesson, but I'm going to be using those terms interchangeably. And so if you are sitting here this morning and you're saying to yourself, well, I don't have a problem with drugs or alcohol. You have a problem. Somewhere in your life you have some kind of habit that is causing you to either not live the life that you want to live, or being faced with things that you don't want to be faced with, or maybe you do have some kind of addiction issue. This presentation is going to kind of focus on all of that. The idea about how habits and addictions can tear us down, can hurt those around us, and ultimately can cause us to lose the people that we love dearly. Now, when I first gave this seminar in Buchanan back in August, Melissa, my wife, the one that looks like Loretta, she told me, whatever you do, don't get up and just read. I'm not a reader normally. In fact, if you've ever heard me speak before, generally speaking, up here on my iPad or my notes is just single little bullet points. This one's a little bit different because of how close in nature this is to me, because of how tough this is to talk about. I literally wrote out everything. That ain't like me. But so she said, don't get up there and just read this. And I told her I can't make any promises. And then she said, don't run out the door. And I told her I can't make any promises. And just before church started, I ran out to the Jeep real quick. I have asthma. I've had it since I was a kid. I ran out to get my inhaler because I was already having a hard time breathing. And I looked at that steering wheel of the Jeep and thought, man, they may not miss me if I just drive off. But please understand that I am speaking to you this morning directly from my heart. And that I want truly for there to be a change in your life. And I want you to be able to find the peace that you need, to find the hope through God, and the salvation that there is, not only for our souls, but for our lives here on this earth. Christ came to give us life and to give it more abundantly, right? And that's not just speaking about a spiritual life, but He has given us a pathway and a way for us to live healthily here on this earth. So for you that are in this audience this morning or watching online or whatever the case may be, I want you to think about this whole seminar as an opportunity for you to do one of few things. Either change the life that you're living, if you have that problem, or to gain the knowledge that you need in order to be able to help someone change that life. Don't just dismiss what you're going to hear this morning. But for us to be able to get this whole idea through, we've got to start back at the beginning, right? We've got to understand the context. We've got to understand, where is AHREN coming from? He's an odd guy, so we've got to figure out what in the world he's talking about. And so, to the beginning we shall go. You know, in retrospect, looking back, it's easy for us to be able to look back on our lives and realize a couple of things, right? It's easy for us to look back, and especially when it comes to things like addiction or habits, it's easy for us to look back and say, that's where it started. Right there, at that moment. I remember it so clearly, and all I had to do was, and that's going to be a famous statement that's going to live in your mind for the rest of your life, is all I had to do was make a better choice. Choose better friends. Just say no. But hindsight is like that, isn't it? Hindsight is like that. We get to look back at the full picture of what was going on. But it doesn't get to change us who we are now. Hindsight really is 20/20. But hopefully with us, we will be able to take this information and be able to clearly see what's coming our way and make a response rather than a reaction. It's my goal over the next few lessons to open our eyes to the devastation of addiction. Specifically, looking at what we call cues and habits or triggers that happen to create that addiction, and most importantly, how to deal with those when we recognize them in our lives or in the people that we love. How many of y'all remember March 3rd, 1984? Yeah, I know. I was sitting there doing this, that, or the other. Yeah, I don't remember it either. So don't feel bad. I don't remember it. March 3rd, 1984. In fact, I shouldn't remember it. In fact, I was just over or just under 4 years old. But on March 3rd, 1984, things were going to change for me. Things were going to change dramatically for me. See, on that date, my younger brother, Ryan John STEIS, was born. At Luke Air Force, not at Luke Air Force Base, at Williams Air Force Base. That base doesn't exist anymore. at Williams Air Force Base just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And there are a few things that I remember about that. I don't remember my brother being born, but I remember Arizona a little bit. I remember my grandfather and I in the backyard. I remember the desert and how hot it was in Arizona. But I don't remember March 3rd, 1984. See, we were there because my father was a military man. He was in the Air Force. And we had just moved from California over to Williams Air Force Base there. My mother, she was a former nurse, turned housewife. But as my mom will probably tell you, my brother and I made that a harder job than probably any nursing job could ever be. On March 3rd, my life changed. I went from being an only child to having a partner in crime. I went from being the only one getting the spankings for the things that I was doing to now having an accomplice that would share in the spankings with me, and sometimes happily. We would share everything, from joys to heartbreak. You know, I'd learned so many things from my brother. Throughout the 36 years that we had together, I would learn so much from him. But I'll be honest with you, I am learning more now than he ever taught me before. See, everyone that knew Ryan as a kid knew him as a sweet, loving kid, someone who wasn't afraid to act silly to make you smile. He would jump up in the middle of things just to give you a hug. He was the kind of guy that would just brighten your day by walking in the door. You knew Ryan was there when he walked in. He didn't even have to say anything. Just the whole energy in the room would change. Everyone smiled when they saw Ryan. He had this innate energy. And I don't know how he did it. But he had this innate energy that would have him just keep going and going and going, just like that Energizer Bunny. You know, and as brothers do, older brothers especially, I picked on him. You know, it's like our job. If you have a sibling, you know, it is your job in order to pick on your sibling, your brother or your sister. In fact, I think it's even in the Bible somewhere, and I'll have to look, but I think that even God said, "Thou must pick on your sibling." And I did. Yeah, I mean, we had to. That's it. We built this great, strong relationship. I had to knock him down every now and then, put him back in his place, like an older brother should. Yeah, I remember specifically he was in elementary school, and he had just learned the word fool, F-U-L-L. And Mom would ask him after dinner, she would say, "Ryan, are you full?" And he would say, "Yes, ma'am." And I would say, "Ryan, are you full or are you full? F-O-O-L." And he would say, "Oh, yeah, that's it." And I would just laugh and laugh and laugh. "Yeah, I gotcha." But there's something that a lot of people don't understand when it comes to brothers and sisters. See, you're allowed to pick on them. But what can't happen? No, that ain't it. He picked on me. Nobody else is allowed to pick on him. Nobody else. That was my brother. Ain't nobody else picking on him. And I have stared down many a folk who got brave enough in order to pick on my brother. See, my brother and I, we're basically twins. Now, we're 4 years apart. I'm 4 years older than Ryan. But everyone always thought we were twins. Now, he was 6'1". I am not 6'1". Yeah, I'm scraping 5'9". But I always told everybody that I got all the strength in the family and he got all the hair. You know what I'm talking about. But everyone always thought we were twins, but we were inseparable like that. You know, we would always have each other's back. In fact, when I was in high school, I still see this memory so clearly. And most of y'all who were in high school remember doing things that you're probably less proud of. But you had to have someone there with you, right? This one particular memory, specifically, I was 16 years old. We had this Ford Aerostar van in our family. And not like a nice new one. This thing was a beater. And we had decided that we were going to go roll someone's house. And if you are associated, if you put the word high school and toilet paper together, there's only one thing that comes out of that. And that is rolling someone's house. And so we decided that we were going to go one night and we were going to roll someone's house in the most epic way possible. I mean, even in the Guinness Book of Record, I am certain this toilet papering is in there. This was a toilet papering of monstrous proportion. But if you are going to do a job well, you must plan everything perfectly. Well, we had the toilet paper. I had my friends. We were missing a getaway driver. I mean, you can't just hang around waiting for them to see you outside in their front yard. So my brother volunteered, or was voluntold. Now, he was 12 years old, and at that time, he was not 6'1". Something that we would find out later is going to play a major role in this. So as we are toilet papering the house, suddenly the front door burst open, the homeowner comes outside screaming, and all of us start screaming, "Ah!" And we take off running. And inside the car waiting was my little brother in the driver's seat, and our dog Minnie, which was this tiny little wired-haired miniature Dachshund that just barked and barked and barked. And as we jump inside this car, Ryan's got the music blaring. We jump inside the car. The dog is yapping at us. Yap, 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 yap. The guy is screaming at us outside in the front yard. The whole yard is completely white with toilet paper. And we're screaming, "Go, go, go, Ryan, go, go, go!" And he presses that gas pedal. And we tear off out of there at a whopping 1 mile an hour. See, Ryan at 12 years old wasn't very tall. He couldn't reach the pedal. So we sped out. Away from the greatest toilet papering that has ever been. And I'm certain that the homeowner could have walked past us. You know, but we had each other's back. And that's what brothers do. Brothers are supposed to have each other's back. We're supposed to be there for one another. I remember his middle school piano recital. I remember him graduating from high school. I remember at the ceremony that they were doing there, we grew up in Valdosta, Georgia, and I attended the Forest Park Church of Christ down there. And they would always do a dinner for the kids that were graduating. And I got to tell everyone just how much I admired Ryan. What I thought about him. And as I stood there, tears just rolling down my face. He stood up and just hugged me. See, we weren't best friends. We weren't even just brothers. We were more than that. And of course, the stories, we could go on forever. This morning about all the fun that we had, all the excitement and adventures that we got into. But there was a lurking darkness that was just waiting for the right moment to strike. See, Ryan, at a young age, had been diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And he struggled in school, although he was completely brilliant at whatever he put his mind to. He was one of those kids that just could not sit still. And at the time, honestly, not a whole lot, or it seemed as though not a whole lot was known about ADHD. And so at that time, the main course of action went from school-type correction and punishment in order to get the kids to pay attention and behave, and turned more to drugs, things like Ritalin and Adderall. And both of these are a methamphetamine-based drug. And the point of my talk, and even throughout the rest of this week, is not that medicine is bad. It is not. In fact, it is something that I believe is a true blessing and gift. If it wasn't for medicine, I wouldn't be here this morning. In high school, I actually blew my lung out because of my asthma, a hole in my lung. If it had not been for the medicine in order to fix that, I would not be here. Medicine is one of those things that is definitely a gift from God, but just like all the gifts from God, we are able to use it either for good or we are able to use it for bad. God has created us in a way that we can take and make that choice, but He has also created us in a way where habits and even somewhat to the side of addictions are good in one sense, but completely bad in another. That's why it is so vitally important, folks, for us to recognize those things in our lives, for us to take action and take ownership of what we are doing to ourselves daily. Paul says, I buffet my body daily. Why? Because it is that important. Because the moment that we let go, the moment that we stop paying attention, the moment that we stop focusing on the end goal, the path that we are shooting down, the moment we stop is the moment that we give an opening to the devil. See, Ritalin is a stimulant. But for people that have ADHD, it works in an opposite effect. See, whereas we would take it and we would become the ADHD. We would become hyperactive. We would become almost unruly in some places. For them, it calms them down. Now, there are still some other negative side effects, things like hyperfocus, the inability to sleep, a racing heartbeat. All of these other kinds of things come along with that when even people with ADHD take the medicine. Loss of appetite. You know what? But at least the kids in school were sitting still, right? We have to be very careful. Have to be very, very careful in the things that we are putting into our body. See, I am not necessarily someone that relies heavily on medication, and neither was Ryan. Ryan was more of a holistic kind of person. You would almost dare say that Ryan was kind of a hippie. You know, we talked about Ryan having all the hair. He always had this kind of long hair. I mean, not long hair. He wasn't Samson or nothing, but I mean, like, you know, he would have this longer hair, and he was kind of hippie-ish. But Ryan tried to take care of himself. And he would drink things like kombucha. Any of y'all ever had that? Yeah. Kombucha? All right, listen. As soon as this is over, go straight to the grocery store and get you a kombucha. I promise you'll love it. Oh, make sure to video yourself when you drink it for the first time. I want to see that. You know, he would do things like that. He would even eat hemp protein, which by far tastes like dirt. But it was good for you. You know, Ryan was just that kind of guy. He would do the things that he would think was good for his body sometimes. You know, but Ryan wasn't always on his medication. And what's interesting is whenever he would find that the things that he was doing for himself through health-wise was not helping his ADHD, he would turn back to his medicine. Which makes sense, right? We do that. We don't drink enough water, we get headaches, so rather than drinking water, we take ibuprofen. We don't get enough rest at night, and so we start becoming sleepy, so we drink caffeine. We do the things to help the situation rather than help the causation. And Ryan was kind of like that too. But all of this, what this was doing was setting up in him a pattern, a dependency, some kind of a routine or ritual that when Ryan would recognize something deficient in his life, ADHD was taking control of him, he would seek to medicate. Why? Because that's what he was told in school would fix it. So what started as a solution to help Ryan concentrate and do well in school set him on a destructive path that he almost didn't even know about. So, like I said, I am almost 4 years older than Ryan. So when I was graduating from high school, Ryan was just entering. Our lives at that time were very different. And church, this is something for you to hear right now. I had a strong youth group at church. In fact, nearly 99% of my friends were members of that youth group. I had a support group whose mindset was one set on doing what is right, what is good. The support group of my friends were instrumental in helping me stay focused on the right things and away from the things I should not be around, especially at that age. See, they avoided things like alcohol, drugs, sex, pornography, theft, and things like that. And because of this, I never had the opportunity and never honestly had the desire. I wasn't around those things. I'm a firm believer in nurture over nature. Your environment and who is in it have such a strong impact on your behavior, who you will become now and when you get older. See, but once I graduated from high school, my good influence had left for college. They were gone. I was no longer around my support group to help hold me up. I found myself drinking, going out to bars, dating different girls, all while intentionally hiding it from those that I knew could actually help me. I started getting involved in recreational drugs. I thought no one knew. But there was someone that was watching. I remember this very clearly. In fact, this is probably 25 years ago. I could still drive you to the house in Valdosta. I had ended up at a friend's house. And whatever the situation was, Ryan was with me. And we had gotten to the house, and the guy there was not necessarily the best role model or example that we were visiting. And as we were sitting there talking, he got out some marijuana and asked if I wanted any. And I had said no. Ryan was right there, and I had said no. But then something happened right then, a pivotal moment in my life, something that would be an actual life-changing decision. Ryan asked me if he could have some. I had a choice to make. You know, life comes down to choices. Sometimes what we may think is a meaningless, one-time choice. All of life comes down to choices. Every single thing that you do, the makeup of who you are, what you believe, how you act, the words that you use, how you choose to look at other people, comes down sometimes to one single choice. One single decision that you had to make. And I don't mean to scare you, folks, but this is exactly the way that life works. And we need to start taking ownership of those decisions, thinking before we speak, because if we don't, the outcome can be absolutely disastrous. I didn't give it enough thought. I didn't know, honestly, how familiar Ryan was with illicit drugs at that time. And having spoken to him since this particular incident, he claimed that he had smoked pot before with some of his friends, but I didn't know if that was true or not, if he was just saying that because he could tell how distraught I was by this decision. But I sat for a second as that question was asked to me. I thought loosely about Ryan's question, and I made a decision. Go for it. That was my answer. Go for it. See, Ryan looked up to me. I was his role model. See, Ryan liked rock and roll and Led Zeppelin. He played the drums because I taught him. All of these things that he did, all of the person that he was becoming was because he looked up to me. He was watching me. And in one single action, I gave him my blessing to do illicit drugs. I truly believe that had I said no in this instance, our lives would be completely different. But from this moment, after that time, we fed off of each other. I'd bring him things to try, and he would bring me things to try. And soon we were living together, and I was buying him booze, and he was introducing me to his new friends who could supply me with drugs. We were both still active in church. Folks, that should scare us. Either we are not doing a good enough job, church, to equip each other or to encourage each other. That I can be out there on the streets doing drugs throughout the week and come in here and nobody is the wiser. That's terrifying. I'm not blaming the church. But we call ourselves a family. We need to act like it. We were still, quote-unquote, good people, helping others when we could. Doing good works, even in the mission field, and helping to do things like packaging supplies and making runs to hurricane relief and the like. However, we were living the lives I described earlier. Behind the scenes. After a few years of this, Ryan eventually moved to Nashville, Tennessee to start a new life. He was tired of it. He was killing it in Nashville. After working for a record company, he met the owner of a company that saw potential in him. See, Ryan was brilliant. He could see business like we see colors, and he could strike up a conversation with anyone, and everyone loved him. Ryan ended up running a whole chain of Smoothie Kings in about 2 years' time, but his business mind didn't coincide with the owner of the company. Rather than quitting, Ryan was just the type of person to endure the abuse. This is a common issue with a lot of us. We would rather internalize our hurt, disappointments, anxieties, and depressions. When we feel those triggers, our habits kicking in, we use them as an escape. And just like when Ryan was in school, unable to deal with the stressors of not performing the way that people in charge were wanting him to perform, Ryan reverted to his school grade habit: medicine. Just like Ryan, I developed a coping mechanism for the stressors in my life. I wasn't using drugs any longer, mostly because I didn't know where to get them from. I had replaced those habits with another, and that was exercise. Now, exercise in and of itself is not a bad habit, but after dropping 20 pounds in a single month of not eating, exercising constantly, and not sleeping, I developed some painful conditions. I had headaches constantly, the type that even the strongest ibuprofen wouldn't touch. I developed an addiction to energy drinks, one that even after nearly 20 years of having is still hard for me to shake. When I started to get the headaches, knowing that pain medicine wouldn't work, I instinctively turned to drinking again. I was drinking often, but without anyone close to me knowing how bad it was, except for Ryan. I'd call him and tell him what was going on in my life. And we would talk about things that we wanted to change, but just for some reason we couldn't. We were addicted to our new forms of medicine. But Ryan told me something that eventually would stick, and something that we will talk about later on. See, he would make for himself a goal. He would say that I'm not going to drink from the beginning of the year till my birthday. And from what I know about how to beat this, Ryan had the right idea. So I gave myself a goal: join the military. I quit school and joined the Air Force. And if there's one thing about the military, it can help to break habits quick. Mostly because for 8 weeks, you don't get anything but 2 minutes to eat, lots of exercise, and no sleep. Amen. I'm going to try to hurry this up. We are running out of time rapidly. For Ryan, drugs eventually became a thing of the past. But as Ryan moved from Nashville, he moved down to Valdosta after being married. And they say to keep your family and business completely separated, and for good reason. We speak to family and treat them in ways that we would never speak or treat someone who is not related to us. So after nearly 3 years of butting heads with his father-in-law, the stressors of family life won over. Ryan was needing to medicate to escape from the growing pressures of the business and his extended family who were treating him unfairly. But anyone who is an addict knows once you're an addict, you're always an addict. It's just waiting for the right moment to show back up. Quietly, Ryan was dealing with everything the way he had been programmed to deal with things from the start. See, Ryan was what we call a functioning alcoholic. He could literally be drinking all day and you'd be no the wiser. I'm not like that. Perhaps that's why it was easier for me to stop. Something for you all to remember is that confronting people with these issues is a very, very touchy subject. Most of the time, we just don't want to hear it. If you've ever been an alcoholic, been an addict of any kind, you know you just don't want to hear it until you are ready to hear it. Amen. You will not change until you have made the decision to change. But for Ryan, things went a little differently. His wife gave him an ultimatum: go to rehab. And Ryan didn't want to go. And when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, nothing good can come from it. I won't go through all the details of it all, especially for our time's sake. But just remember, we are at our most vulnerable when we are angry and being made to do something we don't want to do. And oftentimes, drug and alcohol addiction is because of a missing part in our lives. We must understand the needs of the person suffering before we can even begin to fill that missing and hurtful void. This is not what happened for Ryan. I can't fault Ryan's wife especially, because it must have been very hard having to make that decision while pregnant. Life for Ryan got harder. Rehab is not always a place for recovery. Oftentimes it's a place for like-minded people to build relationships with each other and begin to fill that void that we just talked about. So a person may go in broken and leave shattered, but with meds. I'm not minimizing rehab. I'm simply saying, just as Ryan told me, a person won't change until they are ready and able to change. I mentioned defining moments earlier. Here's mine, and we'll wrap this up. On September 30th, 2020, my wife was laying in the hospital bed recovering from a procedure when I got a call from an old friend in Valdosta. I was tired. At first I ignored it. He left a message. I need you to call me right away. I called back, and all I heard on the other end of the line was, I don't know how to tell you this. Ryan is dead. This isn't the end of the story, though. But this is how it started. What seemed like a happy, normal, what other people would look at as perfect friendship and brotherhood and family. But if there's one thing that we can take away from this story, one thing that needs to stand out in our minds, that we are not our mistakes. We are not just our problems. We are the amazing things that we accomplished and that God accomplishes through us. The many lives that we touched, the countless people that we've helped. Ryan wasn't just someone that struggled. To my daughter, he was the greatest thing. To him, Ava was squiggly head. And someone that he would hold and play with. To my son, he was Uncle Ryan, the fun-loving pirate that would take him on adventures. And to Ryan, Miles was already a soccer star headed for fame. To his son, he was Big Bear and Daddy. And his son was Little Bear, his best friend. To my wife, he was the brother she never had. And she was his sister. To my mom and dad, he was always going to be that little boy who came home with flowers and drawings, who would drive them nuts but was always there to tell them how much he loved them. And to him, they would always be his greatest inspiration, example, and North Star. To me, Ryan was my brother, my best friend, my confidant, my right-hand man, my motivator, my person, who would be brutally honest with me and my mistakes. He was my greatest champion, always had my back. He was a rock star. And to Ryan, I will forever be his voice for how great he was, how passionately he loved and gave, how brilliant he was, and how life-changing it was to know him, even if just for a moment. It's because of him I am who I am right now. And my prayer as we wrap this up this morning is that because of him you can overcome, beat your demons, draw closer to God, and make positive life changes to be able to help those around you as well. We are not our mistakes. there is hope, and we will get to that in the next coming lessons. And that hope's name is God. Thank y'all so much for allowing me to be here this morning. If you are struggling personally, if you are going through this now, know that there are so many here at this congregation who want to see you doing well, who want to see your life restored physically and spiritually. You do not have to suffer alone like so many people feel like they have done. We are here for you. In the next lesson, we will be talking about our habits and cues during our worship hour. But you don't have to wait till then to get that help that you need. We're going to take a break here for a few moments before we begin worship. And if you have a need, if something is weighing on you and you need someone to talk to right now, I'm not going anywhere. You can come and talk to me after this. Thank y'all so very much for your patience.